It was just after midnight when my daughter Allison burst into my sleeping area. Her hands trembled violently, her complexion pallid, and a trickle of crimson streamed down her arm from a minor laceration. With quivering lips, she murmured, "Mom, someone has been inside my chamber, observing me as I slept." A chill went through my core. I seized my firearm, traversed the corridor, and when I pulled open the door to her storage space, the sight within sent a profound fright through me. Before I share the entire recounting, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you are viewing from. My designation is Clara Jenkins. I am 58 years of age, a widow, and I reside in an upscale, tranquil district of Scottsdale, Arizona, after my spouse Thomas passed away a few years prior. My daughter Allison and my granddaughter Riley relocated into my dwelling. Allison had recently gone through a harrowing separation and required a secure sanctuary to begin anew. I welcomed them wholeheartedly, since this edifice, although filled with recollections of my husband, felt excessively expansive and silent without loved ones within its walls. Life within our residence was placid, yet somber on occasion. Allison worked extended shifts and often appeared fatigued, shouldering the burden of all her prior ordeals. Riley, merely 14, was striving to adapt to a novel educational institution and new companions. She occasionally wandered into my space late in the evening, stating she could not sleep. I didn't object. It served as a reminder that she was still only a juvenile who needed solace. One evening, Allison was seated with me at the kitchen counter. Her gaze seemed weary, but she smiled and articulated, "Mom, thank you for permitting us to stay here. I don't know what I would have done without your help." I reached across the counter, gripping her hand. "You don't need to express gratitude. This is your house just as much as it is mine." That night, as we secured the entrances and settled into our beds, a quiet serenity descended. The outside world might be unpredictable, but within these fortifications, I believed we were protected. My main concern was assisting Allison in reconstructing her existence and ensuring Riley felt cherished and safeguarded. But security can be a mere fantasy. I would discover that truth in the most dreadful manner imaginable, because just after the clock struck 12, the sound of swift movement in the passage awoke me. And when Allison burst into my room, injured and shaking, I recognized that everything was about to fundamentally shift. When Allison rushed into my chamber that night, I could perceive the dread in her gaze even before she uttered a word. Her whole body was quivering, her complexion ashen, as if all vitality had departed her face. The wound on her forearm was not deep, but the sight of gore staining her sleepwear made my stomach churn. She gripped my sleeve and gasped, "Mom, someone was present in my space." I awakened, and I swear I caught sight of an individual standing near the wardrobe observing me as I slept. The declarations impacted me more forcefully than a physical assault. For an instant, I contemplated whether she might be fabricating it, a night terror induced from sheer fatigue, but the manner in which her voice fractured, the way her eyes darted backward toward the corridor, convinced me she was speaking the truth. She had witnessed something, someone. I pulled her near, endeavoring to soothe her tremors. "Allison, inhale deeply. You are safe now. You are here alongside me." But even as I offered these assurances, I felt my own heart hammering. Secure? I wasn't sure if that was accurate any longer. Before I could collect my thoughts, Riley stumbled in, rubbing her eyes. "Grandma, what is amiss? Why are you both conscious?" She froze when she noticed the blood on her mother's arm. Her voice descended to a terrified whisper. "What transpired?" I didn't want her to panic, so I quickly asserted, "It's nothing serious, my dear. Your mother merely scratched herself, but we must be careful." Internally, however, I was anything but composed. My auditory sense was sharpened, straining for any sound beyond the three of us. The house was silent, too silent. I strode toward the bedside table drawer where I kept Thomas's antique revolver. He had educated me on its operation years ago, stressing that I must perpetually possess the ability to defend myself. My hands shook as I grasped it, but holding it provided a slight sense of control. Allison's voice shattered the quiet. "Mom, do not go in there solo, please. What if he remains here?" I looked at her, recognizing both my adult offspring and the terrified child she used to be. I cannot overlook this. If a stranger is inside my home, I must know. I must protect you both. I directed Allison to lead Riley back to my room and fasten the door behind them. Irrespective of what you perceive, do not unbolt the door until I return, I instructed. Allison attempted to object, but she noted the expression on my face and nodded reluctantly. Riley clung to her, wide-eyed, before they vanished back into the bedroom. Now it was just me, the weapon substantial in my hand, and the oppressive silence of the house pressing in. I stepped into the passage, the flooring groaning under my gait. Every shadow seemed sharper than usual, every corner darker. My ears registered faint noises, a slight air movement, the ticking of the timepiece in the lounge, and the faint drone of the refrigeration unit. But I could not dismiss the conviction that someone was still present, holding their breath in the shadows. When I reached Allison's room, I paused at the threshold. The door was ajar, just as it had been when she had fled. My heart rate accelerated. I pushed it further open and stepped inside. The atmosphere felt cooler, as if a vent had been left uncovered. Indeed, the drapes fluttered slightly, and I observed that the window on the opposite side was slightly cracked. I moved closer and discerned muddy boot prints upon the hardwood floor. My stomach clenched. They were too large to belong to Allison or Riley, and they led from the window straight to the closet. That's when I knew this was not a dream. Someone had been here. Someone had been stationed in that room observing my daughter's slumber. My breath hitched in my throat as I focused on the closet door. It was shut, but not completely secured. The edge was slightly parted, just enough to make the obscurity inside appear deeper, more menacing. I elevated the handgun, my hands trembling, and addressed the space in a subdued, resolute tone. "If anyone is concealed within, emerge immediately." Silence. The quietude was worse than any noise. My own pulse reverberated in my hearing. I took a prudent step forward, never diverting my gaze from that slender line of blackness between the door and the frame. Again I spoke, my voice quavering yet loud enough to carry. "This is your sole chance. Come out, now." Still nothing. The stillness pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. My mind raced. What if he possessed a weapon? What if he leapt at me the moment I unlocked the door? But what if I did nothing and he remained hidden there, awaiting another opportunity to harm Allison or Riley? I could not take that gamble. I tightened my grip on the weapon and took one more step nearer. The aroma of moist earth drifted out from the wardrobe, blending with the faint metallic smell of blood from Allison's wound. Every instinct of my being shrieked hazard, but a more potent impulse propelled me onward, the necessity to protect my kin. I extended my free hand slowly and placed it on the closet door. My digits trembled against the cold surface. For a brief instant, I closed my eyes, whispered a quick supplication, and then yanked the door wide open. The storage door swung open with a shrill squeak, and I held my breath, the revolver steady in my shaking hands. For a fleeting moment, the space seemed deserted, only outerwear and containers stacked on the floor. A feeling of relief began to surface, but then I noticed the garments swaying gently, as if they had just been moved. My heart throbbed so violently I could hear it echoing in my ears. I took a guarded step closer, moving the coats aside with the gun's barrel. That's when I noticed it. A footprint on the closet floor, fresh and damp with muck, imprinted onto the wooden planks. Someone had been here, perhaps just moments earlier. My throat constricted. He could still be concealed within the residence. I retreated slowly, shutting the wardrobe once more, but keeping my gaze fixed upon it. Every nerve ending warned me that I could not simply await the arrival of the authorities. If the invader was still here, if he was lurking elsewhere in the house, I had to ensure the safety of Allison and Riley. They relied on me. I recalled Thomas, my deceased partner, who always remarked, "When the situation is dire, Clara, family comes first. You defend them, even if you are terrified." His counsel calmed me. I proceeded down the hallway, each stride deliberate, my ears straining for the slightest sound. The house appeared alive with shadows. My breathing came in shallow bursts, and my finger rested lightly on the trigger. He could leap out at any second. When I reached my bedroom, I tapped gently on the wood. Allison's worried voice called out, "Mom, is it safe?" "Stay inside. Keep the door secured," I replied firmly. "Please don't go alone," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I must," I countered. "I won't permit him to approach you or Riley again." For a long minute I remained outside the entrance, torn between anxiety and resolute. Part of me desired to stay sealed in that chamber with them until dawn, but another part knew I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I disregarded the peril. If he was still near, I had to find him. I decided to examine the remainder of the dwelling. My steps were cautious, my vision scrutinizing every corner. The living room was dim, with only faint moonlight filtering through the window dressings. I observed that the back exit was unlocked. My blood ran cold. Had I neglected to secure it with the bolt earlier, or had he entered that way? The thought of him roaming freely through the same spaces where Riley completed her assignments, where Allison and I drank beverages in the evening, filled me with a deep fury that sliced through my fear. I bolted the door quickly and shifted my attention to the dining area. As I inspected the location, I noticed a chair slightly displaced, angled differently from the others. I moved closer, and there on the seat was a scrap of material, dark and ripped, as if it had been snagged on something. I held it up in the dim illumination. It wasn't ours. That was all the confirmation I needed. He was here, and he had been circulating through the house while we were asleep. A floorboard groaned behind me. I spun around, weapon raised, but saw nothing. My chest tightened as the silence enveloped me again. Whoever he was cunning, patient, and waiting. I returned to Allison's room, compelling myself to face the closet again. I wrenched it open again, this time with more force, determined not to let fear dictate my actions. The coat swung wide, and a gust of cold air struck my face. That's when I noticed something I had overlooked before. At the rear of the wardrobe, a narrow panel was slightly ajar. It wasn't merely a storage space. There was a cross space behind it. My entire body went cold. The idea that someone could have been slipping in and out of that hidden section, watching, waiting, made my stomach twist with revulsion. I knew then that I couldn't delay another second. The choice was stark. I had to open that crawl space and confront whatever was inside. If I backed away, if I left it, I would never be able to close my eyes at night again. I whispered beneath my breath, "This ends now." With the firearm steady in my hand, I reached for the panel. My fingers brushed against the rough timber, and I pulled it open. The blackness behind it was absolute, swallowing the faint light from the passage. I stabilized my breathing, every nerve in my body taut. I leaned closer, peering into the crawl space, knowing I was moments away from uncovering the truth that had been concealed within my home. And in that moment, terror and bravery collided inside me, sharpening into one thought. Whatever was waiting, I had to face it. For Allison, for Riley, and for myself. I stood paralyzed at the edge of the crawl space. The darkness, stretching ahead of me, resembled an open mouth,
poised to consume me entirely. My pulse reverberated in my ears. Every primal instinct screamed at me to slam the panel shut and retreat, to phone the authorities and wait. But a different voice, more potent, more savage, urged me forward. This was my sanctuary. Allison and Riley were depending on me. If someone was hiding in here, it was my obligation to confront them before they could inflict more harm upon my kin. I held the handgun higher and leaned closer to the aperture. If anyone is inside, this is my final warning. Emerge forthwith. My tone was steady, but I felt the tremor underlying it. A heavy silence pushed back at me, thick and stifling. Then, a subtle rustle. The sound was so faint I initially believed I had imagined it, but as my vision adapted, I detected the slightest shift of motion deeper within the hidden space, like something striving to melt into the gloom. My stomach plummeted. He was in there. My breath hitched. "Come out!" I barked, louder this time. A shape stirred. Gradually, as though clawing his way out of a bad dream, a man began to surface from the blackness. His features became visible first, haggard, pallid, his eyes wide and vacant. His hair was slick, hanging over his forehead, and a strange smile pulled at his lips, as if he derived satisfaction from the fear etched across my own face. He was grasping something in his fist, and when the faint light illuminated it, I saw the glint of a blade. My blood turned to ice. He had been lurking inside my dwelling, mere inches away from my sleeping daughter. He crouched in the crawlspace doorway, his voice low and rasping. "She bears such a resemblance to her father. I've been watching her, night after night." Nausea rose in my throat. Fury annihilated my dread. "You've been inside this home?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. He tilted his head, his smirk widening. "Every evening. She never realized. Sometimes I would stand directly above her bed, just listening to her inhale." I felt my legs weaken, but I quickly regained my footing, clenching the firearm tighter. "Depart," I commanded, aiming it squarely at his chest. "Step out of there right now." For a second, he remained motionless. His eyes darted between me and the weapon, as if determining whether I possessed the nerve to pull the trigger. Then, in one quick motion, he lunged forward, swinging the knife. I stumbled backward, adrenaline surging through me, and raised the revolver. My voice tore out of me. "Do not move!" He froze mid-stride, the barrel mere inches from his chest. His twisted smile vanished, replaced by a dark scowl. From down the hallway, I heard Allison scream, "Mom, what is occurring?" "Stay in the room!" I yelled without turning my head. My entire concentration was fixed on the man before me, his chest rising and falling quickly, the knife still gleaming in his grasp. My hands trembled, but my voice remained steady. "Release the weapon." For a moment, it appeared he might refuse. Then, with a sharp clatter, the blade hit the floorboards. The sound reverberated through the house like a gunshot. I compelled him backward into the light, keeping the gun trained on him. As he entered Allison's room, the smell of sweat and grime clung to him. That's when I noticed the strap of a satchel slung across his shoulder. I ordered him to drop it. He sneered, but complied, allowing it to fall. Allison had come to the door despite my caution, her face ghastly. Riley clung to her leg, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom, is he the one?" Allison whispered. I nodded. "He is the one." With my foot, I nudged the bag open. My stomach turned. Inside were sheets from a journal filled with sketches, drawings of Riley asleep, notes about when Allison left her quarters, even specifics of my nightly regimen. He had been stalking us for weeks, perhaps months. Allison gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God." The man's voice was strangely calm. "I just wanted to be near, to see her. She doesn't realize how much I care." "Care?" My voice was raw with fury. "You broke into my dwelling. You harmed my daughter. You hid in her wardrobe like a beast." Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Allison must have contacted them the instant she heard my shouts. Relief flooded through me. But I did not lower the firearm. Not yet. Not until I witnessed him being apprehended. The man glowered at me, his calm demeanor shattering into something darker, more unhinged. "She will think of me. She will remember I was here." I stepped nearer, pressing the weapon firmly. "She will forget you. She will remember her mother and her grandmother protecting her. That is all she will remember." Moments later, the police officers burst through the main entrance, sidearms drawn. They subdued him to the floor, handcuffed him, and dragged him away as he yelled incoherently, his voice echoing through the residence until it finally faded into the night. When the door slammed shut behind them, my knees buckled. Allison rushed to me, enveloping me in her arms, as Riley clung to my shoulder. The magnitude of what had just occurred overwhelmed me all at once. The fear, the anger, the relief, it all came crashing down. But above everything was one single realization. We were safe. The nightmare had been lurking in our home, but we had faced it, and we had endured. The house settled into silence again after the law enforcement personnel departed, but it was not the kind of quiet I was accustomed to. It lacked tranquility. It was weighty, saturated with the echoes of the recent events. The wardrobe door remained ajar, the crawlspace still gaping like a festering injury. The scent of the man's sweat and grime seemed to linger in the air, even though he was gone. Allison sat on the sofa, pallid and shaking, embracing Riley tightly. Riley hid her face in her mother's shoulder, her small frame quivering with sobs. I stood there for an extended period, still gripping the revolver in my hand, my knuckles stark white, unable to release it. When I finally lowered the weapon and placed it back onto the table, the weight's absence left me feeling both empty and drained. I took a seat beside them, drawing Riley into my arms. Her tears soaked my top as she whispered, "Grandma, he was truly in my bedroom. He was truly watching me." I suppressed the lump in my throat and kissed the top of her head. "Yes, darling, but he is apprehended now. He will never return. You are secure." The words sounded firm, but deep inside, I was shaking. I doubted if I would ever experience that same sense of safety again, not in the way I used to. Allison looked at me, her eyes glossy. "Mom, I should have noticed. I should have paid attention when I sensed something was amiss. I thought I was just being overly anxious." Her voice cracked. I neglected to protect her. I grasped her hand firmly. "Do not dare blame yourself. None of this is your fault. You acted perfectly. You came to me. You notified the police. You rescued your daughter. We shielded her together." The three of us remained seated that way for a considerable time, clinging to one another, the night slowly giving way to the morning light. The golden glow of dawn streamed into the room, but instead of providing comfort, it only showcased the damage more clearly. The boot prints on the floor, the unsecured window, the scraps of paper in that man's satchel. Every reminder was proof of how close we had come to losing everything. The police returned later that morning to collect formal statements. They informed us the man had been residing temporarily in deserted structures nearby. He had been observing us for weeks, sneaking into our residence at night through the unlatched window.
The journal they recovered detailed his obsession with Riley, his sketches, his writings, his elaborate notes about our daily lives. Hearing this made my stomach clench. The idea that he had been lurking in our house, watching from the darkness while we slept, made me feel violated in a way I couldn't articulate. That day, I had every lock exchanged. I had the crawl space permanently sealed and strengthened. I inspected every inch of the house, examining windows, doors, and storage areas until I was certain there was no entry point we didn't know about. Allison assisted, her hands still trembling as she fastened new bolts into the frames. Riley followed me everywhere, unwilling to leave my side. I promised her repeatedly, "This house is protected now. No one will ever injure you here again." But the reality is, safety is never a thing you can guarantee. It is something you must fight to maintain every single day. That night, as I lay in bed, slumber refused to come. I reflected on Thomas, my late husband, and how proud he would have been to see me stand my ground. Fear had almost incapacitated me, but love gave me the resilience to shield my family. I realized then that courage is not about the absence of fear. It's about facing the fear nonetheless. Over the subsequent few weeks, Allison and Riley began their slow process of healing. Riley went back to her school, although she still insisted on sleeping with her door ajar and the lights on. Allison became more vigilant, checking every lock before retiring, sometimes twice. And I continued on, but something within me had fundamentally shifted. I no longer took the silence of my home for granted. I listened more carefully. I noticed minor details, and I trusted my gut instincts. One evening as we shared a meal, Riley inquired, "Grandma, why do people commit such terrible acts like that man?" I considered my response for a moment before answering. Because sometimes people are damaged, and they make decisions that cause suffering to others. But what truly matters is that we are more powerful than the fear they try to introduce into our lives. We confronted him, and we prevailed. That is what you must remember. Her small smile gave me hope. Looking back now, I grasped that the sheer terror of that night left scars we will always carry. But it also left us with something else, a deeper connection, a stronger sense of family, and the knowledge that love can provide us with courage even in the darkest circumstances. I will never erase the image of that man in the crawl space, but I will also never forget the sight of my daughter and granddaughter safe in my embrace, alive and secured. To anyone who hears my narrative, remember this: danger can find its way into the most mundane locations, but so can bravery. Never doubt your ability to protect the individuals you cherish. And before you depart, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more accounts similar to this one. Nearly 11 months had elapsed since that terrifying evening, and while the residence in Scottsdale had been meticulously restored, its inhabitants were forever changed. The old entrances, which once seemed to rely on mere memory, were supplanted by reinforced steel barriers equipped with sophisticated multi-point locking mechanisms. The floor in Riley's room, where the secret access point had been located, was now sealed with concrete, eternally burying the darkness beneath it. But the most significant transformations occurred internally. Riley, soon turning 15, had become more contemplative than most teenagers. She no longer requested to sleep with the door ajar, but she insisted on keeping a flashlight, a powerful military-grade model, on her nightstand. Allison, observing her daughter, saw not only a trauma survivor, but also a young woman who had uncovered a remarkable fortitude. Their relationship, already strong following the divorce, was now nearly palpable. They understood each other without speaking, as if the silent awareness of shared peril had forged them into a single unit. Clara herself never abandoned her vigilance. Every morning before brewing her coffee, she surveyed the property, verifying the integrity of the perimeter and checking for any fresh imprints. She had enrolled in self-defense instruction, where her maturity was a source of respect, not an impediment. Thomas's firearm now rested in a secure vault, but the sense of assurance she gained from knowing she could defend her loved ones lay not in the weapon itself, but in her own unwavering resolve. One evening, as the sun descended over the Arizona mountains, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson, the three of them sat on the patio. Clara sipped her tea, Allison scanned a novel, and Riley completed schoolwork. The atmosphere was tranquil, yet not carefree. Riley suddenly lifted her head. "Grandma, are we somehow different now?" Clara set down her cup and looked at her granddaughter, whose eyes held none of the fear they once did. "Yes, my dear, we are different," she replied, her voice soft but convinced. "We didn't become afraid to live. We simply learned to live better. Now we know that walls can be solid, but our strength is within them. We are family, and that is our most enduring defense. We traversed the darkness and found the light within ourselves, ensuring we will never fear it again." Allison smiled, a gesture filled with deep comprehension and esteem. She reached for Clara's hand and squeezed it firmly. The house still remained a sanctuary, but its walls were now constructed not merely of lumber and stone, but of affection, alertness, and the indomitable courage that had bloomed on the darkest night. They had survived, and more importantly, they were thriving.